Have you ever, like, felt that pressure?
Yeah.
You know, like, everyone's telling you what success should look like and what you should be doing with your life. I know I have. It's, it can be kinda overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know what? If real wisdom and making a difference actually came from, like, a quieter place, like, from a different source.
Right?
And that's what we're gonna look at today as we dive into Sylvia, A Great Woman, this memoir by Marlene Smith.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this memoir, like, it's a whole tribute to Sylvia, but it shows how powerful those quieter influences in our lives are. The people who maybe weren't looking for the spotlight, but their values and what they did, they really stick with you.
Exactly. It all begins with Marlene describing Sylvia's house. Like, picture this, an old house. It's not even painted, almost hidden in this rocky backyard. You might even just walk right past it.
Yeah, but then Marlene takes us inside, and it's totally different. The inside is spotless and cozy and warm. Everything's really well cared for, even the furniture, even though it's old. And there's this nice smell that fills the air. It's like Sylvia herself is saying, hey, don't judge a book by its cover.
That difference really sets the scene for understanding Sylvia. She wasn't about fancy things or showing off. She was happy with simple things.
Mm.
Marlene even talks about how Sylvia did laundry with just plain blue soap and a washboard. I mean, can you imagine doing laundry like that today?
I know, it's pretty wild. It shows how resourceful she was and how she focused on what you actually need, not just what you want. And it makes you think about our lives today. We're always told to buy the newest phone or upgrade our lifestyle. Sylvia's way of life makes us stop and think about what's really important.
Marlene even described Sylvia's kitchen. It was old-fashioned with this hearth where she cooked over a wood fire. It makes you think, in a world where we want everything instantly, what can we learn from slowing down and actually enjoying the process and savoring the simple moments?
Right. It's about being present in the moment and choosing to do things with intention and finding joy in the everyday things. And this also went for how generous Sylvia was. She might not have had much, but she knew how to make it last and make sure everyone had some. Like Marlene talked about how Sylvia made drinks last longer by adding ice and carefully sharing them out so that everyone had some and felt included.
I remember that image. It reminds me that being generous isn't about having a lot. It's about being willing to share what you have, no matter how small it is.
Yeah.
And you can see Sylvia's influence on Marlene. Later on, when Marlene was a single mom and struggling financially, she said it was Sylvia's example that helped her focus on what was truly needed to be resourceful and make ends meet.
Yeah, it shows how powerful those simple lessons can be. They stick with us and shape our choices and actions even years later.
And it wasn't just about things. Sylvia had this amazing way of connecting with people. Marlene talks about how good she was at communicating, how she could talk to anyone of any age and have a really meaningful conversation.
When you felt truly heard, like someone really cares about what you're saying. That's how Sylvia made people feel. Marlene gives examples of her playful teasing, her ability to get answers without being pushy, and how she absolutely refused to use insults.
Yeah, it's like she had this rule about respecting people's dignity, even when she disagreed with them. Marlene remembered that Sylvia never called her names like idiot or fool, even when she might have deserved it.
Right. It makes you think, how often do we use those kinds of labels when we talk to people? Do we give space for open and respectful conversation even when we don't agree? Sylvia's way of talking reminds us that words matter. Choosing them carefully can help people understand each other better and feel connected.
This takes us to another part of Sylvia's personality that I found really interesting, how she was graceful, but also kind of eccentric.
Yeah.
You know, Marlene describes her as quiet, reserved, maybe even a bit peculiar.
Mm.
But there was this underlying elegance in how she moved and carried herself.
There's a certain strength in that quiet confidence, like knowing who you are and not needing other people to tell you you're great. And Marlene tells the story that really shows this. There was a time when Sylvia was sick, but she still took great care of her hygiene and how she looked.
That really stood out to me. It's like even when she wasn't feeling well, she stayed committed to self-respect and dignity. It wasn't about being vain. It was about having standards, even in tough situations.
Yeah, it's a lesson that's always relevant. You know how the world is obsessed with appearances? Sylvia's example shows us to work on that inner strength and grace, that feeling of self-worth that doesn't depend on things outside of ourselves.
And you can see how this affected Marlene.
Mhm.
She says that Sylvia taught her to aim for excellence, to be organized, and take pride in her work. And she still does that today.
It's such a great example of how those subtle, everyday things can shape our values and how we see life. It wasn't some big lecture, she just learned by watching and experiencing it.
Now imagine you're a teenager and you find out you're pregnant. You're scared, confused, and don't know what to do. That's what happened to Marlene. And it's a really important moment in the book. She tells Sylvia about it, and Sylvia's reaction is amazing.
Yeah, she's just calm and accepting, not judgmental at all. She tells Marlene, don't even think about abortion. Keep that child because it might be the only child you might ever have. Every child is a blessing from God. Keep it and take good care of it.
Those words are so powerful. They tell you so much about Sylvia, her faith, and how much she believed in the value of life. And although Marlene says she'd already decided against abortion, Sylvia's words gave her comfort and hope when she really needed it.
It shows how important it is to have someone you can talk to, someone who won't judge you and will support you based on their own values and what they believe. Sylvia wasn't trying to force Marlene to do anything. She just created a safe space for Marlene to work through her feelings and make her own choice, knowing she had full support.
And that idea keeps coming up in the memoir, having support without judgment and being that strong person for someone else. It's about making people feel seen and heard and loved no matter what they're going through.
It's about knowing that everyone's going through something, their own struggles, and sometimes all they need is someone to be there for them to offer encouragement and just listen.
And I find it fascinating how the book mixes personal stories with these bigger life lessons. It's not just about Sylvia's life, it's about how we deal with life's ups and downs, how we build relationships that mean something, and how we make choices that line up with what we believe in.
And those choices, like Marlene shows us, they have effects that reach other people, not just our own lives, but the people around us too. It reminds us that what we do matters. Even small choices can have a big impact on our lives and the lives of others.
Now, I want to talk about something Marlene mentions about Sylvia that I found insightful, how she could talk to anyone of any age and have a good conversation.
It's more than just being talkative. Marlene points out how Sylvia used humor, how she knew how to get information without being nosy, and how she just made people feel comfortable enough to open up to her.
It makes me think how important it is to listen and be curious when we're building relationships. Sylvia was great at making people feel seen and heard, and that's something we can all learn from. With all the distractions we have these days, how can we be more present and focused when we're talking to people?
Right. It's about putting away our phones, looking at people when they're talking, and really listening to what they're saying, not just the words, but how they're saying it. It's about asking questions that make them think and trying to understand them instead of just waiting to talk.
And it's about being okay with quiet moments. Sometimes the best conversations happen in those pauses when we give ourselves time to think and feel.
Yeah, it shows emotional intelligence. Sylvia had a knack for reading people, and she knew how to change her communication style to connect with them and build trust.
And those skills are helpful everywhere, not just in personal relationships. Think about work community stuff, even social media. Being able to talk to people effectively, to listen with empathy, and to build relationships are super important for success in any area.
Definitely. It's about knowing that everyone has a story, their own perspective. And when we're curious and show empathy in our conversations, we create a better world for everyone.
Marlene also shares this little story about how Sylvia dressed that I found really sweet. She says Sylvia would often wear old clothes over her nicer clothes when she was home, just in case someone came over unannounced. Then she can quickly take off the old clothes and be presentable.
I love that. It shows how practical and smart she was, but also how much pride she had and how she wanted to be proper even in everyday life.
It reminds us that how we present ourselves matters. Even small things show respect for ourselves and others.
And it also shows how adaptable Sylvia was. She was comfortable being herself, whether she was wearing her old clothes or her good clothes. It's a good quality to have, being comfortable and confident in different places and situations.
Marlene goes on to describe how Sylvia, even though she lived simply and was humble, had this elegance about her, a certain grace in how she moved and carried herself.
Yeah, that comes up a lot in the book. It suggests that elegance isn't about expensive things or looks, but something inside us that shines through in what we do, what we say, and how we treat other people.
It's a beautiful idea, and it makes me think how we can all try to have that inner elegance, no matter what our situation is. It's about holding our heads high, treating others with respect, and facing challenges with grace and calmness.
Right. It reminds us that real beauty comes from the inside, and it shows in our kindness, our respect, and how gracefully we handle the complicated parts of life.
We've talked a lot about Sylvia's good qualities and her positive influence on Marlene, but it's important to remember that nobody's perfect. We all have our flaws.
You're right. And while the book focuses on Sylvia's good side, there are hints that she was a complex person with her own contradictions.
Like Marlene says, Sylvia was very private and reserved, not someone who showed her feelings easily.
And she mentions Sylvia's eccentricities, which some people might have thought were strange.
Those details make Sylvia's character more interesting and remind us that even the people who influence us the most are human beings with their own unique quirks and complexities.
It's good to embrace those complexities both in ourselves and in other people. It's what makes us special, and it helps us understand human relationships in a more real and deeper way.
So as we continue learning about Sylvia, a great woman, let's remember this is a story about real people with their strengths, weaknesses, and contradictions. And it's through those complexities that we can get the most meaningful understanding of what it means to be human.
Right. It's about knowing that we're all on a journey, learning and growing along the way. And that even with our imperfections, we can still touch people's lives, leave our mark on the world, and inspire others to be their best selves.
It's amazing how Sylvia's legacy and the huge impact she had on Marlene, so much of it wasn't like direct teaching.
Mm.
It was more about how she lived her life, the values she had.
That's so true. It's like actions speak louder than words. Sylvia wasn't giving Marlene lectures on life. She was living those lessons, and Marlene picked them up by watching and experiencing them.
It makes me think about the people in my life who've had that kind of quiet but strong influence. Who are the Sylvias in your life who has shaped what you believe and how you see things even without meaning to?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? And Marlene encourages us to think about that throughout the book. She doesn't just tell stories about Sylvia, she also pulls out these great insights and gives practical advice based on what she learned.
Right. It's like she's saying, here's what I learned from this amazing woman, and here's how you can use these ideas in your own life.
And she goes even further. She gives specific advice to different groups, young women looking for mentors, people who are mentors, and mother figures.
It's like she created a guide for building good relationships and using our influence in the right way. And her advice is so down to earth and practical. For example, to young women looking for mentors, she says it's important to be careful. Don't just go for someone who's charismatic or looks good. Look for someone who's genuine, consistent, and most importantly, leads by example.
She even warns about red flags like people who act erratically or have double standards. It's about realizing that being a mentor is a big deal, and we need to think carefully about who we let influence our thoughts and choices.
Think about the mentors you've had. What made you want to learn from them? What did you learn, and how have those lessons shaped your journey? It's worth taking a moment to think about those influences and how they've helped make you who you are today.
And on the other hand, Marlene also talks to people who are mentors or influencers. She emphasizes how important that responsibility is, using Jesus as the perfect example of humility, love, and being faithful to God.
It's a high standard, but it reminds us that we should use our influence to help others, to guide them toward truth and goodness, and to show them a higher purpose.
And for mother figures, she acknowledges their natural ability to nurture and shape young minds. She encourages them to teach values like empathy, compassion, and focusing on whatsoever things are true, honest, just pure, lovely, and of good report. It's a beautiful vision of the positive impact mother figures can have on the next generation.
It makes you realize that mentorship isn't just a formal title or position. It's part of all our relationships.
Hmm.
We're all influencing each other in ways we may not even know.
Yeah.
And it reminds us to pay attention to the messages we're sending both with our words and our actions.
Exactly. And that takes us back to the main theme of the book, legacy. Sylvia may have lived a simple life, but her impact was huge. She left a legacy not just through what she did, but through the people she influenced and the values she passed on to others like Marlene.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have the potential to make a difference in the world, and that even the smallest acts of kindness, wisdom, or grace can have a ripple effect that goes way beyond what we can imagine.
And it's not just about the good impact. Marlene also talks about the complicated parts of influence. She knows that just as there are people who guide us toward good, there are also forces that can lead us in the wrong direction.
This is especially true today when we're bombarded with information and opinions from everywhere.
Hmm.
It can be hard to figure out what's true, what's valuable, and what's just noise.
Exactly. And that's where Marlene's advice about being discerning is so important. She tells us to be critical thinkers, to question what we believe, and to look for different perspectives. It's not about blindly following anyone. It's about thinking about ideas carefully and choosing our influences wisely.
And I think it's important to admit that even with the best intentions, our influence isn't always good. We all mess up, we say things we wish we hadn't, and sometimes our actions have unintended consequences.
That's part of being human, but it's also a chance to grow. Marlene doesn't hide her own mistakes in her relationship with Sylvia. She admits she feels bad for not being there more for Sylvia later in life, for letting life get in the way of their connection.
And it reminds us that even in the most loving and supportive relationships, there will be times when things are tough, when we misunderstand each other and miss opportunities. It's just part of life.
But what's important is how we learn and grow from those experiences. Marlene being honest about her own struggles makes the story feel real and encourages us to be understanding with ourselves and others. We're all still figuring things out, and even our imperfections can be part of how we influence each other.
So as we keep exploring Sylvia's legacy and the bigger lessons Marlene learned from their relationship, let's remember that it's not about being perfect. It's about being aware of the impact we have, making choices that match our values, and using our influence to make things better in the world, no matter how big or small.
And it's about realizing that our legacies aren't just made from big, grand gestures, but also from the everyday moments of kindness, compassion, and connection that we share with the people around us.
Now let's go back to a specific event that really shows how wise Sylvia was and the impact she had on Marlene's life. Marlene's teenage pregnancy. It's a time of vulnerability, uncertainty, and a huge need for support.
And Sylvia's reaction is really something. She doesn't judge or criticize, she just offers complete acceptance and guidance. Her words are so simple but powerful. Don't even think about abortion. Keep that child because it might be the only child that you might ever have. Every child is a blessing from God. Keep it and take good care of it.
Those words are so strong. They reflect Sylvia's deep faith and her belief in the sanctity of life. And while Marlene says she'd already decided against abortion, Sylvia's words gave her comfort and hope at a time when she must have felt incredibly overwhelmed.
It shows how important it is to have someone you can completely trust, someone who will listen without judging and offer advice based on their own values and beliefs. Sylvia's response wasn't about forcing her opinion on Marlene. It was about giving her a safe place to process her emotions and make her own choice, knowing she had unconditional support.
And that theme runs throughout the memoir, the power of non-judgmental support and the importance of being that source of strength for others. It's about creating a space where people feel seen, heard, and loved no matter what.
It's about understanding that everyone's going through their own stuff, their own challenges, and sometimes all they need is someone to be there with them, offering encouragement and just listening.
And I think it's cool how the memoir mixes personal stories with these bigger life lessons. It's not just about Sylvia's life. It's about how we deal with the complicated parts of life, how we build relationships that matter, and how we make choices that show what we believe in.
And those choices, like Marlene shows us, have consequences that affect other people too. Not just our own lives, but the lives of the people around us. It reminds us that our actions matter. Even small decisions can have a big impact on our lives and the lives of others.
Now, I want to switch gears a bit and talk about something that Marlene mentions about Sylvia that I found really insightful, her amazing ability to have a conversation with anyone, no matter their age.
Yeah, and it's more than just being chatty. Marlene highlights Sylvia's skillful use of humor, her tactful way of getting answers without being nosy, and her uncanny ability to make people feel comfortable opening up to her.
It makes me think about how important it is to actively listen and be genuinely curious when we're building relationships. Sylvia clearly had a gift for making people feel seen and heard, and that's something I think we can all learn from. In a world where distractions are constantly vying for our attention, how can we cultivate that kind of presence and intentionality in our interactions?
It's about putting down our phones, making eye contact, and truly listening to what the other person is saying, both verbally and non-verbally. It's about asking thoughtful questions, seeking to understand, rather than just waiting for our turn to speak.
And it's about being comfortable with silence. Sometimes the most powerful conversations happen in those quiet moments when we allow space for reflection and contemplation.
It also speaks to the power of emotional intelligence. Sylvia was intuitive. She could read people, and she knew how to adjust her communication style to create a sense of connection and trust.
And these are skills that are valuable in all areas of life, not just personal relationships. Think about the workplace community involvement, even navigating social media. Being able to communicate effectively, to listen empathetically, and to build rapport are essential for success in any setting.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story to tell, a perspective worth hearing, and that by approaching our interactions with curiosity and empathy, we can create a more harmonious and fulfilling world.
Marlene also shares an interesting anecdote about Sylvia's personal style that I found quite endearing. She describes how Sylvia would often wear a set of old clothes over her proper clothes when she was at home, just in case she had unexpected visitors. Then she could quickly shed the old clothes and present herself in something more presentable.
I love that detail. It speaks to Sylvia's practicality and resourcefulness, but it also reveals something about her pride and her desire to maintain a sense of decorum, even in the most ordinary circumstances.
It's a reminder that presentation matters, and that even small gestures can convey respect for ourselves and others.
It also speaks to Sylvia's adaptability. She was comfortable in her own skin, whether she was wearing her old clothes or her proper attire. It's a quality I think we could all benefit from, cultivating the ability to be both comfortable and confident in different settings and situations.
Marlene goes on to describe how Sylvia, despite her simple lifestyle and humble demeanor, had an air of elegance about her, a certain grace in the way she moved and carried herself.
This is a recurring theme in the memoir. It suggests that elegance isn't about material possessions or outward appearances, but rather an inner quality that shines through in our actions, our words, and our interactions with others.
It's a beautiful concept, and it makes me think about how we can all strive to cultivate that inner elegance regardless of our circumstances. It's about carrying ourselves with dignity, treating others with respect, and approaching life's challenges with grace and composure.
It's a reminder that true beauty comes from within, and that it manifests in the kindness we show, the respect we give, and the grace with which we navigate life's complexities.
We've talked a lot about Sylvia's positive qualities and the impact she had on Marlene's life. But I think it's important to acknowledge that no one is perfect and we all have our flaws.
That's a fair point. And while the memoir focuses primarily on Sylvia's positive attributes, there are hints of complexities and contradictions in her character as well.
For example, Marlene describes Sylvia as being rather private and reserved, someone who rarely expressed her emotions openly.
And she also mentions Sylvia's eccentricity, which might have been perceived as odd or unusual by some.
These details add depth to Sylvia's character and remind us that even the most influential figures in our lives are multifaceted human beings with their own quirks and complexities.
I think it's important to embrace those complexities both in ourselves and in others. It's what makes us unique and interesting. And it allows for a more authentic and nuanced understanding of human relationships.
So as we continue our deep dive into Sylvia, a great woman, let's keep in mind that this is a story about real people with all their strengths, weaknesses, and contradictions. And it's through those complexities that we can glean the most profound insights into the human experience.
It's about recognizing that we're all on a journey, learning and evolving as we go, and that even in our imperfections, we have the capacity to touch lives, leave a mark on the world, and inspire others to strive for their own best selves.
It's interesting how Marlene doesn't try to hide the tough parts of their relationship. She's honest about those times when she was frustrated when Sylvia's strong opinions or her quirks caused some friction.
Yeah, and that honesty makes the story feel so real. It reminds us that even in the relationships we value the most, there's going to be some bumps in the road, some disagreements and tension. That's part of what makes those connections genuine.
And it makes you think about influence in general. It's not always simple or easy. There are times when the people who influence us the most are also the ones who challenge us, who push our buttons, and yeah, maybe even drive us a little crazy.
Exactly. And it's often in those moments of friction that we learn the most about ourselves, about what we believe in and where our boundaries are. It's a chance to practice being patient and understanding and learning how to handle differences.
Marlene also talks about something I think a lot of us can relate to, that guilt and regret that can creep in when we're not as close to someone as we used to be. She talks about how her life got busy and she didn't see Sylvia as much as she wished she had, especially as Sylvia got older.
I know that's such a common feeling. We get caught up in our own lives, our jobs, and everything else. And sometimes we forget how precious time is with the people we love. And then when we lose someone, those missed opportunities can really hurt.
It's a good reminder to appreciate the time we have with the people who are important to us, to make an effort to stay connected, and to tell them we love them and appreciate them while we still can.
And it also shows the importance of forgiveness, forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. Marlene seems to have made peace with her own mistakes in the relationship and found a way to honor Sylvia's memory with love and gratitude, even though she still feels some guilt.
This brings us to one of the most powerful ideas in the memoir, the idea of legacy. Marlene clearly says that Sylvia played a huge role in shaping her life, not just as a woman, but as a lady. She talks about the values Sylvia had, things like humility, grace, wisdom, kindness, and a strong faith. And she explains how those qualities became a part of who she is.
And she describes how she's carried those lessons and values into her own life and her personal life and her work. It's a beautiful example of how one person's influence can spread outward, affecting not just the people they know, but future generations too.
Sylvia's legacy isn't about money or fame. It's about those inner qualities she had and how they touched and changed the lives of the people around her. It's about the ripple effect of kindness, compassion, and living with integrity.
It reminds us that true legacy is about the impact we have on others, the values we share, and the love and kindness we give. It's about the things that last even after we're gone, the echoes of our lives that stay in the hearts and minds of those we've touched.
There's this one part that I think really captures this idea. Marlene writes, "You don't know whose like you may influence as you go about your normal daily life. We must live a life filled with richness, not of tangible things, but of the simple things that God has blessed us with. Your qualities should not die with you, but should live on throughout generations. Your name and your character will always be remembered, and so we must carry both without blemish or notoriety."
Those are powerful words, right? They make us think about the kind of legacy we're building with our own lives. Are we living in a way that shows what we believe in? Are we making choices that will make a positive difference in the world? Are we trying to be the kind of people whose good qualities will be remembered and valued by those who come after us?
It's a call to be aware of what we do, to work on our character, and to use our influence, whether it's big or small, to make the world a better place. It reminds us that we're all connected and that even small acts of kindness, generosity, or grace can have a big impact on other people's lives.
And it's a beautiful tribute to the power of everyday influence and the lasting legacy of a woman named Sylvia. Her story reminds us that being great doesn't always mean being famous or getting awards. It's often found in the ordinary parts of life, in the simple acts of love and kindness that we show to the people around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Sylvia, a great woman, I'm left feeling amazed by how one person's life can touch and change so many others.
And I'm struck by the reminder that we all have the potential to leave a legacy of love, kindness, and wisdom that will live on after we're gone.
If Sylvia's story has resonated with you, if it's made you want to think about the people who have influenced you or the legacy you want to leave behind, I encourage you to check out the whole memoir. It's a heartwarming and inspiring book that will stay with you.
And as you go about your day, remember that your actions have a ripple effect. You have the power to make a difference, to leave the world a little brighter, a little kinder, a little more hopeful. Embrace that power and let your legacy be one of love, integrity, and lasting impact.
Have you ever felt that pressure?
Yeah.
Like everyone's telling you what success should look like and what you should be doing with your life. I know I have. It's it can be kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know what? If real wisdom and making a difference actually came from a quieter place, like from a different source.
Right?
And that's what we're going to look at today as we dive into Sylvia, a Great Woman. This memoir by Marlene Smith.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this memoir, it's a whole tribute to Sylvia, but it shows how powerful those quieter influences in our lives are. The people who maybe weren't looking for the spotlight, but their values and what they did, they really stick with you.
Exactly. It all begins with Marlene describing Sylvia's house. Picture this, an old house. It's not even painted, almost hidden in this rocky backyard. You might even just walk right past it.
Yeah, but then Marlene takes us inside, and it's totally different. The inside is spotless and cozy and warm. Everything's really well cared for, even the furniture, even though it's old. And there's this nice smell that fills the air. It's like Sylvia herself is saying, hey, don't judge a book by its cover.
That difference really sets the scene for understanding Sylvia. She wasn't about fancy things or showing off. She was happy with simple things.
Mm.
Marlene even talks about how Sylvia did laundry with just plain blue soap and a washboard. I mean, can you imagine doing laundry like that today?
I know, it's pretty wild. It shows how resourceful she was and how she focused on what you actually need, not just what you want. And it makes you think about our lives today. We're always told to buy the newest phone or upgrade our lifestyle. Sylvia's way of life makes us stop and think about what's really important.
Marlene even described Sylvia's kitchen. It was old-fashioned with this hearth where she cooked over a wood fire. It makes you think, in a world where we want everything instantly, what can we learn from slowing down and actually enjoying the process and savoring the simple moments?
Right. It's about being present in the moment and choosing to do things with intention and finding joy in the everyday things. And this also went for how generous Sylvia was. She might not have had much, but she knew how to make it last and make sure everyone had some. Like Marlene talked about how Sylvia made drinks last longer by adding ice and carefully sharing them out so that everyone had some and felt included.
I remember that image. It reminds me that being generous isn't about having a lot. It's about being willing to share what you have, no matter how small it is.
Yeah.
And you can see Sylvia's influence on Marlene. Later on, when Marlene was a single mom and struggling financially, she said it was Sylvia's example that helped her focus on what was truly needed to be resourceful and make ends meet.
Yeah, it shows how powerful those simple lessons can be. They stick with us and shape our choices and actions even years later.
And it wasn't just about things. Sylvia had this amazing way of connecting with people. Marlene talks about how good she was at communicating, how she could talk to anyone of any age and have a really meaningful conversation.
When you felt truly heard, like someone really cares about what you're saying. That's how Sylvia made people feel. Marlene gives examples of her playful teasing, her ability to get answers without being pushy, and how she absolutely refused to use insults.
Yeah, it's like she had this rule about respecting people's dignity, even when she disagreed with them.